To hear more, listen to the podcast. Just search for Hancock and Kelley.
Welcome back to Hancock and Kelley. This show is all about a lot of questions, and we have them for John Hancock on the right and Michael Kelley on the left. So let's get started with a big ask from President Joe Biden. He's looking into getting more judges on the Supreme Court. He's not trying to replace anyone. He wants to add more judges. Right now, the top court of the land has 6 conservative judges, 3 liberal ones. John Hancock, if Biden is successful, what do you think this will actually accomplish for Democrats?
Well, I think this is a ludicrous idea. And, you know, the court is what it is. It's and John Roberts, if you look at his jurisprudence, I think he's really become a centrist on that court. And this court just ruled against Donald Trump within the last month or so, excuse me. So, you know, who's ever thought that you're going to solve a problem by bringing more lawyers to the table? You know, I just don't, this is not 9 has been a very good, effective number throughout the history of this country. There is no need to expand it. And going from 9 to 13 just makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, go ahead. And Michael Kelley, I mean, do you think the president will be successful in this?
Well, I'm not sure that this is necessarily being something pushed by President Biden. Mm-hmm. He said he wanted to study the courts and really a lot of the inequities that exist in the court system from top to bottom. He's commissioned a group to deal with that. There are some Democrats on the left-hand side of the aisle who are looking to expand this to 13 judges right now. John gave us a little bit of a history lesson. He's right. For the better part of 100 years, we've been at 9 justices, but that's not always been the case. It's grown and it's shrunk over time. We need a court that's reflective of America, and I think the fact that Joe Biden is standing up and saying this is something that we ought to examine is an important conversation. And then when the Republicans use the phrase court packing and try to do it with any type of normalcy, it's almost laughable after what we lived through the past 4 years.
John Hancock, your response to that, because, and you said that it's just fine, it's just been working just fine, but Michael said that pretty much implied that the country is leaning more left than the court is right now. What do you think?
Well, the court is always going to be a reflection of the country, and this one is. You have 3 female justices on that court. You have an African-American. You have a Hispanic female on that court. It really is a good representation of the country as a whole. All 9 of those justices, by the way, disagree with expanding the court. So there's some import there. And this is really nothing other than the Democrats who have the executive branch and the legislative branch control in Washington, D.C., wanting to have control of the judicial branch as well. It's pure politics, and I think it's going nowhere.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about D.C. Overall, especially the issue and question of statehood. Mayor Muriel Bowser said the Capitol riots was just one big reason the district should be a state. A lot of people don't know that it's not a state. If that is successful, how would statehood help the district protect federal buildings and staff?
Well, being a part of the country and being its own state gives it some unique opportunities to have its own National Guard and to be able to deal with a lot of the things that individual states can deal with. It's not only Washington, D.C. that's been pushing for statehood. We've talked about Puerto Rico and other territories who are looking for it as well. It's time that these Americans enjoy the same luxuries and responsibilities and citizenship that so many of us have had. Throughout history, we've added states into our country. We haven't always been 50, and it's time for it to grow again.
John Hancock, Michael brought up a very interesting point. He's absolutely right about Puerto Rico. A lot of people there, of course, want statehood. The other territories do as well. What do you think about, fitting a few more stars in on that flag?
Well, the reason D.C. is not a state is because that's the way the founders, when they made it the capital, that was the agreement that they came to, and it has worked well. And those citizens, those American citizens, whether they live in Washington, D.C. or in Puerto Rico, they do have the rights and benefits of American citizenship. So, I think, again, this is a political move on the part of Democrats to ensure that they've got a structural majority in the United States Senate. And again, it would take 60 votes to get this done in the Senate, and that's not going to happen.
Okay, and Michael, do you agree that for any of these territories or any of these districts that it's a long shot, at least in this Congress, that they could get statehood?
Yeah, potentially. I think statehood's something different that Congress could deal with outside of the normal filibuster process, but John's right. with the Democrats leaving the filibuster process in place right now, it would be difficult for it to be accomplished. But I think when you're dealing with something as specific and as big as statehood, that may be something that might be pushed to the side.
Well, John Hancock, let's get into what looks like a very messy family dinner with the Republican Party a little later. For right now, the Senate is in a razor-thin Democratic majority. What do conservatives have to do to take it back in the next elections in 2022?
Well, the first thing Republicans need to do is unite. Right now, there's a deep fissure in the Republican Party that is generating a multiplicity of primary elections potentially in the 2022 cycle. That's going to take what is a natural advantage. Being the party out of power in a midterm is a natural political benefit. And if the Republicans cannot unite, they're not going to seize that opportunity. If they do unite, there's every likelihood that they'll take a majority both in the House and the Senate in 2022. But until that unity comes forth, I'm skeptical.
Michael, do you agree that right now, that the fact that the Democrats have a majority right now, almost, given history, almost guarantees that they will lose a majority in the midterms?
No, unfortunately, the Republicans continue to hold on to the flagpole that is Donald Trump, which was repudiated by the voters and continues to become far more unpopular. Yet we see Republicans going down to kiss the ring of a disgraced former president. And as long as they continue to try to pull the train of Donald Trump, I think they'll be pulling themselves in the wrong direction.
Well, Michael, let's go ahead and reach across the aisle. Do you see any rising stars in the Republican Party who could take the majority from the Democrats?
Well, in terms of the United States Senate, it will be interesting to see what kind of candidates are recruited. Obviously, here in Missouri, the Republicans are going to try to hold Roy Blunt's seat. The Democrats are looking at several candidates, a Scott Sifton or a Jay Nixon, who would be able to topple them. But right now, in terms of stars inside the Republican Party, there seems to be only room for one, and that's Donald Trump. And he's already been repudiated by the voters and has become more and more unpopular with citizens across the country. I don't think tying yourself to Donald Trump is the way that the Republicans get back the majority.
And John Hancock, do you see any stars from the left?
On the Democratic side, not really. You know, a guy like Joe Manchin's got an interesting challenge because he represents a state that is increasingly Republican, and he's a Democrat. He's kind of walking that tightrope. A Democrat like that would have at least a semblance of a chance winning in a state like Missouri.
Huh. Okay. Well, you minced words there. I wasn't quite clear what you meant on that at all. No, just kidding. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate this. Let's go ahead and take a break because we are going to need it. Josh Hawley, he's safe in his U.S. Senate for now. John Boehner has a book. Matt Gaetz has almost no support, it seems. And Republican governors are facing an invisible protest from businesses around new voting legislation in several states. John Hancock will try to tell us what in the world is going on in the GOP. Oh, and there's Michael Kelley, too. In just a few on Hancock and Kelley.
Numbers, letters, learn to spell, nouns and books and show and tell. Playtime, we will throw the ball.